Beamy, name is Thea. 32 years old, Senior Operations Manager. 7 years in Project Management. MBA from a decent school. Excellent performance reviews every year. Found out I was about to be fired. Not for poor performance. Not for misconduct. Because I'm a Capricorn. And Capricorns have toxic energy. According to our new HR director, who makes hiring decisions with birth charts. This is the story of how my company replaced traditional credentials with astrology. How we weeded out high performers because their zodiac signs were incompatible with the company's cosmic vision. How we built a team based on celestial alignment instead of technical skill. And how the entire operation collapsed because you can't run a business on star charts. I'm going to tell you everything. The birth chart interviews, the Capricorn purge, the Mercury retrograde shutdowns, and the total collapse that no cleansing ritual could prevent. The company was called Aurora Dynamics, a mid-sized software consulting firm specializing in enterprise resource planning systems. We helped companies implement and customize complex software that managed their entire operations, from inventory to accounting to human resources. The work required precision, technical expertise, and the ability to meet strict deadlines. There was no room for ambiguity. We had about 60 employees. Developers, project managers, consultants. A good reputation in our industry. Steady clients. Reliable revenue. The kind of company that worked because competent people did competent work. For 7 years, I was proud to be part of it. Dahlia had founded Aurora 12 years ago, building it from a solo consulting practice into a legitimate firm. She was technically skilled, business savvy, and had earned her success through genuine expertise. But something shifted in her over the past 2 years. She became interested in what she called alternative leadership philosophies. Started talking about energy alignment and cosmic timing. Most of us thought it was a harmless personal interest. Then she hired Celestine as our new HR director. And everything changed. Rapidly and irreversibly. Celestine came from a background I couldn't quite verify. Her resume mentioned holistic talent acquisition and vibrational hiring practices. During her introduction to the company, she talked about creating a workplace where cosmic energies aligned for maximum collective potential. I thought it was quirky corporate speak. I was catastrophically wrong. Within her first month, Celestine implemented what she called the Celestial Compatibility Assessment. Every new hire would be required to provide their exact birth time and location, which Celestine would use to generate a complete astrological chart. This chart would be weighted equally with traditional qualifications in hiring decisions. In some cases, it would override traditional qualifications entirely. I raised concerns immediately. In a private meeting with Dahlia, asked if she understood the legal implications of making employment decisions based on birth dates. She said astrology wasn't discriminatory. It was just understanding people's natural energies, like a personality assessment, but more accurate. The first Zodiac-based rejection I witnessed was for a senior developer position. The candidate, a man named Marcus, had 15 years of experience, an impressive portfolio, and had aced every technical interview. He was exactly what we needed for a critical project that was understaffed. Celestine rejected him because he was a Capricorn. She explained her reasoning to the hiring committee. Capricorns were driven by ambition and achievement, which sounded positive to me. But she framed it as toxic productivity culture. Said Capricorns created pressure for others, made people feel inadequate by comparison. Their energy was incompatible with nurturing workplaces. Marcus was not hired. The position stayed open for 3 more months while we searched for candidates with the right celestial profile. Celestine eventually hired a Pisces with 4 years of experience and mediocre technical skills because Pisces' energy was creative and intuitive and would flow well with the existing team dynamics. The project fell behind schedule almost immediately. The zodiac hierarchy became clear quickly. Certain signs were preferred. Others were essentially blacklisted. The criteria had nothing to do with job performance. Libras were highly valued because they were balanced and harmonious. Celestine hired 3 Libras for project management roles in a single quarter. The problem was that Libras, according to astrological stereotypes, struggle with decision-making. Whether you believe in astrology or not, the 3 Libra project managers Celestine hired happened to be genuinely indecisive people. Perhaps it was coincidence. Perhaps she selected for the stereotype. Serenity was the most extreme example. 29 years old, Libra. Hired to manage our largest client implementation. She was pleasant, diplomatic, well-liked. She also couldn't make a single decision without consulting at least 5 other people and changing her mind 3 times after. Projects stalled waiting for her to commit. I watched a critical infrastructure decision get delayed by 6 weeks because Serenity couldn't choose between 2 vendor options. Both options were viable. Both had minor trade-offs. A competent project manager would have analyzed the trade-offs, made a decision, and moved forward. Serenity scheduled meeting after meeting, created pros and cons lists, consulted stakeholders repeatedly, and still couldn't commit. The client eventually made the decision themselves, frustrated by our paralysis. Pisces developers became another problem. Celestine loved Pisces for creative roles, said their dreamy, intuitive nature made them ideal for innovative work. The Pisces developers she hired were indeed creative and imaginative. They were also consistently late on deliverables, lost in their own thoughts instead of shipping code. Willow was assigned to my team after the hiring spree. She was 26, genuinely talented in abstract ways, and completely unable to work within deadlines or specifications. She would redesign features without authorization because she had a vision. She would miss stand-up meetings because she lost track of time. Her code was sometimes beautiful and often unusable because it didn't match what the client had actually requested. When I documented performance issues and brought them to Celestine, she said I was failing to understand Pisces' energy, that I needed to create space for Willow's process, that rigid deadlines were incompatible with creative water sign expression. I asked how we were supposed to serve clients. She said we needed clients who valued our approach. The Sagittarius problem emerged in finance. Celestine had hired Sage, a 31-year-old Sagittarius, for a senior accounting role. Sagittarians, according to astrological stereotypes, love freedom and adventure and hate being tied down to details. Sage fit this description perfectly. She was enthusiastic about big-picture financial strategy and genuinely terrible at the detailed work that accounting actually requires. Expense reports went unprocessed for weeks. Invoices contained errors that embarrassed us with clients. Tax documentation was incomplete and disorganized. When confronted, Sage said detail work drained her energy, that she was a visionary, not a bookkeeper. Celestine defended her, said we needed to restructure the role to align with Sagittarius strengths. Nobody asked what would happen to the actual bookkeeping. While certain signs were favored, others were actively purged. Capricorns like me were at the top of the elimination list. Celestine viewed Capricorn energy as fundamentally incompatible with the nurturing workplace culture she was building. We were too focused on achievement, too concerned with measurable results, too likely to make others feel pressured by our productivity. The Capricorn purge happened gradually. Performance reviews suddenly found problems that hadn't existed in previous years. Feedback became vague and impossible to address. Not about work quality, about energy and presence and collaboration style. The kind of criticism you can't defend against, because it's not actually about anything concrete. Marcus, the developer we had rejected, would have been our 4th Capricorn. The 3 we had on staff were all placed on performance improvement plans within 6 months of Celestine's arrival. The documented issues were always soft skills, never technical performance. Creates an intimidating environment through excessive productivity. Makes team members feel inadequate by completing work ahead of schedule. Fails to create space for colleagues who work at different paces. I read that last one 3 times, trying to understand what it meant. Apparently being efficient was now a performance problem, because it highlighted that others were less efficient. The solution wasn't to help others improve. It was to punish the people who were already performing, so everyone could feel equally mediocre together. Virgos faced similar treatment. Celestine described Virgo energy as overly critical and perfectionistic in ways that create anxiety. Our two Virgo team members, both excellent quality assurance engineers whose literal job was to find flaws, were counseled about their tendency to focus on problems rather than possibilities. One quit after being told her detailed bug reports were energetically draining for the development team. Aries employees were flagged for aggressive masculine energy. Even the women, especially the women, actually, because Aries women defied expectations of soft feminine collaboration. Their directness was labeled as confrontational, their confidence as domineering. Two Aries team members left within 3 months. The Mercury retrograde policy was where things became truly absurd. For those unfamiliar, Mercury retrograde is an astrological phenomenon that occurs several times per year, lasting about 3 weeks each time. Astrologers associate it with communication problems, technology failures, and general chaos. It's widely mocked in mainstream culture, but taken seriously in astrological communities. Celestine convinced Dahlia to implement mandatory low productivity periods during retrogrades. No major product launches. No significant client communications. No critical system updates. No important decisions of any kind. For 3 weeks, multiple times per year, we were supposed to coast and reflect. The first retrograde under this policy coincided with a major client deadline. We were implementing a new inventory management system for a manufacturing company that had timed their rollout around their production schedule. They needed the system live by a specific date. Their entire operation depended on it. I brought this to Celestine, explained the client commitment, the contractual obligations, the financial penalties for missing the deadline. She said Mercury retrograde was a time for reflection, not launches. That pushing forward would invite disaster. That the client needed to understand cosmic timing. The client did not understand cosmic timing. They understood that they had paid us significant money to deliver a system by a specific date, and we were telling them we couldn't launch because of astrology. The call where I had to explain this was the most professionally embarrassing moment of my career. I didn't mention astrology directly. I said we had identified concerns that required additional review. They weren't fooled. We missed the deadline by 12 days. Waiting for Mercury to go direct. The client charged us the penalty fees, then terminated the relationship entirely. Dahlia blamed the failure on energetic misalignment, said that client wasn't compatible with our values. We lost a $200,000 annual contract. Because of planetary positions, the infrastructure collapse happened during the following retrograde. Our main server cluster experienced a critical failure on day 3 of the 3-week low productivity period. Client data was at risk. Systems were down. This was exactly the kind of emergency that required immediate, decisive technical action. Celestine's response was to suggest a cleansing ritual. I genuinely thought she was joking. She was not joking. She said the server failure confirmed the retrograde energy, that forcing a fix would only create more problems, that we should wait for Mercury to stabilize before attempting major technical work. Our clients couldn't access their systems. I went directly to Dahlia, bypassing Celestine entirely, explained that we had a legal and ethical obligation to restore client access to their data, that waiting 3 weeks would destroy what remained of our reputation, that no amount of cosmic alignment could justify leaving clients without access to critical business systems. Dahlia agreed to authorize emergency repairs, but only after consulting her personal astrologer, who said that certain hours were more favorable than others. We finally got authorization at 11:47 p.m. After clients had been down for 31 hours. The astrologer had determined that window was cosmically acceptable for technical intervention. The senior engineer, who fixed the server, was a Capricorn who had somehow survived the purge. He worked through the night, restored functionality by morning. The next week he resigned, said he couldn't work somewhere that consulted astrologers. before authorizing disaster recovery. I couldn't argue with his reasoning. The exodus accelerated after the server incident. Employees who had been quietly uncomfortable with the Zodiac policies suddenly had a concrete example of how those policies endangered the business. The server failure became a symbol of everything wrong with Celestine's approach. People started leaving not just because of personal dissatisfaction, but because they saw the company heading toward collapse. The departure pattern was predictable. Capricorns left first, pushed out, or fed up. Virgos followed, tired of being called too critical. Aries went next, exhausted by accusations of aggression. Scorpios departed, labeled as too intense. The signs Celestine valued were the ones who stayed. Libras, Pisces, Sagittarians. The cosmic dream team. That couldn't execute anything. What remained after the exodus was a support group, not a company. The employees who stayed were genuine believers in Celestine's vision, or at least willing to pretend they were. They valued harmony over results, process over product, energy over output. They had wonderful meetings about collaboration and alignment. They shipped almost nothing. Project timelines extended infinitely. Because Serenity couldn't make decisions. Code quality plummeted. Because Willow followed her intuition instead of specifications. Financial records became unreliable. Because Sage couldn't focus on details. And nobody with critical energy was left to point out the problems. The investor meeting was the beginning of the end. Harrington, our primary investor, had been patient through declining performance metrics, accepting Dahlia's explanations about transitional periods and cultural evolution. But he finally requested a detailed briefing on hiring practices after hearing rumors about our approach from a former employee. Celestine presented the Celestial Compatibility Assessment with genuine pride. Explain the Zodiac matrix, the sign preferences and rejections, the retrograde policies, the cosmic alignment principles. She thought she was showcasing innovation. Harrington's expression suggested otherwise. He asked clarifying questions with a tone I recognized, the tone of someone documenting what they were hearing for future legal reference. He asked if we had rejected qualified candidates based on birth dates. Celestine said yes, enthusiastically. He asked if we had terminated employees based on astrological signs. She said we had transitioned out energetically incompatible team members. He asked if we had delayed client deliverables based on planetary positions. She confirmed it proudly. The meeting ended abruptly. Harrington said he needed to consult with his legal team about the implications of what he had heard. Dahlia seemed confused about why he was concerned. Celestine assured her that Harrington was probably just a Capricorn who couldn't understand their vision. They laughed about it. The funding was pulled within 2 weeks. Harrington's legal team had determined that our hiring practices likely violated employment discrimination laws. Even if birth dates weren't explicitly protected, making employment decisions based on them created significant liability. His letter cited fundamental governance concerns and irreconcilable differences in operational philosophy. Without investment funding, and with revenue already declining, the financial situation became critical. We couldn't make payroll for the following month. Dahlia called an emergency meeting to discuss options. Celestine suggested consulting the stars for guidance on next steps. I quit that day. Walked out of the meeting while Celestine was explaining that Saturn's position suggested a period of restriction and restructuring. Wrote my resignation letter that evening. Didn't bother with 2 weeks' notice. There was nothing left to transition. The company I had spent 7 years building was already dead. Aurora Dynamics officially closed 8 weeks later. Dahlia announced it as a conscious uncoupling from traditional business structures, said the company had served its purpose and was releasing its energy back to the universe. The clients left holding incomplete projects, probably had different descriptions. For what had happened, I found a new position within a month. At a company that hired based on qualifications, asked about my experience during interviews, not about my birth time and location. It felt refreshingly sane, after what I had lived through, to be evaluated on my actual abilities. instead of celestial positions. Celestine started a consulting practice, helping companies implement holistic hiring. She has clients, apparently, people who want to build teams based on star charts. I hope they enjoy the results. I've seen where that approach leads. It leads to collapse. The lesson from all of this should be obvious. But apparently it isn't, because people keep finding new ways to avoid evaluating employees on performance. New frameworks that replace competence with identity. New systems that prioritize belonging over ability. New excuses for not holding standards. Astrology is just one version. Hire people who can do the job. Evaluate them based on whether they do it. Promote based on results. Fire based on failure. These principles aren't complicated. They're not even controversial. Except apparently, they are now. In some corners of the business world, your employees' zodiac signs don't affect their work. Their skills do. Their effort does. Their judgment does. If you can't distinguish between these things, you shouldn't be making hiring decisions. And you definitely shouldn't be running a company. I'm a Capricorn, by the way. Apparently that makes me a toxic workaholic, with energy that intimidates others. By completing my tasks efficiently, I prefer to think of it as being good at my job. But what do I know? I'm just someone who believes that performance matters more than birth dates. Anyway, that's my story. About zodiac signs replacing degrees. About birth charts replacing resumes. About cosmic alignment replacing competence. About a company that collapsed because they thought the stars would guide them, when what they needed was people who could actually work. Mercury wasn't in retrograde when they failed. They just made terrible decisions and blamed the planets.